Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast, Simon.
A pleasure. Happy to be here. Regular listener, regular viewer. Glad to be part of it.
And we're here just on the eve of another season. It seems to have come about really quickly. Are you pleased with the business you've done over the summer? Because I know you've broken your transfer record, for example.
Yeah, we did. It's been a different and a new summer for us at Stockport because probably for the last few years of windows, we've been always building. That last year we finished third in League One, 5 points off automatic promotion. And we missed out after losing in the semi-finals of the playoffs against Leyton Orient. So we were close. We've obviously got good players and good staff that are hungry to go to the next level. We didn't get there, so of course other clubs look at them and think, well, they're good players, good staff that might want to come and join their clubs. So we've probably been playing a little bit more defence this summer, which is the first time. But as you say, we were able to trade for the biggest numbers that we've done at Stockport whilst I've been there, and make a record signing as part of it. We're very close to getting on record sale as well, but do that, which was different and a good challenge for us to go through.
And you talked about that playoff semi-final defeat to Leyton Orient on penalties. How long does it take to get over something like that as a club?
It's tricky. I think that overall sports people, competitive people, move on quite quickly. I think they're used to, disappointment and having to come back and compete again. And the fact you go off straight into a summer, I mean, me personally, I was back to work the next day because the close season's a really important part to get things moving for the next season. So in some ways, you just get back into the next cycle and you move on quite quickly. But for, I do know that it's like for supporters, it would be hard to reflect on that. I often, when the fixtures come out and you see the promoted teams and the opponents that they're playing versus, if you knowing that you're still in the same division, can sometimes have a bit of but I think it just, I always think about it like a relationship, a little bit of heartbreak sometimes good, isn't it? It reinforces your commitment and just makes us want it even more. So we love that challenge of trying to find that extra %.
And I think what's impressive looking at your 5 years at the club, it's been continual progress, really. Because I know you had the sort of heartbreak against Carlisle in the League Two playoff final.
Yeah, we did.
But then you got promoted the next season. So do you feel that has been the case? It's always been progress along the way, even with the setbacks?
We always aim for that. Like football's so random and some of the stuff is out of your control that you don't know how the other teams are going to do and how they're going to react. And we certainly expect that this year that some big teams will react in a big way. But whether we are, even when we win, we're constantly talking about trying to create better versions of ourselves. That's a bit of a mantra for us, and I think that is maybe that underpins our success a little bit in terms of like it's not just that end result, but it's like every day that we're trying to improve something one way or another.
And you did an excellent presentation for us at a webinar a few years ago about Stockport's 7-year plan.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are you on course, do you think, for that 7 years? Because 5 years in then? No?
Yeah, so 7 years when Mark bought the club as a National League team to get to the Championship, and we were promoted into the league within the first two, promoted out of League Two within the next two. So in theory, we were in League One with 3 years to get to the Championship. Obviously, we just completed a year. So against that timeline, which look, business people like putting timelines and stuff like that. Sports people hate it because it's creating an unnecessary pressure. But it's about giving the whole organisation momentum and showing that it's on a journey. And the fact that we've been able to move through that so far and be almost ahead or on track with the plan, it makes us an attractive organisation to work for and hopefully for other people to want to come and join.
And what I liked about that, I think football can lack those long-term plans a lot of the time. So I thought it was quite rare for a club to have that and stick to it.
The trick is when it doesn't work, right? So if you're still in the National League after 5 years, what do you do? But in essence, it's a statement of intent, isn't it? And what that allows you to do is organise your thoughts, your infrastructure, your cash flow, against that plan in order to enable it. So it's like an aligning principle that gets everybody together to say, okay, well, if that's what our intention is, like, what do we need to do to get there and make sure that the plans at every stage reflect that ambition.
And for anyone who didn't see that presentation, you were very, very strategic in terms of even working out what you thought you would need to spend in each division in each season based on other clubs who'd made the climb through the leagues.
Yeah. I think that's knowing more now and bumping into other people that have brought investment in from outside, or new ownership groups that have come in. Everyone's doing a version of that, really, is benchmarking salaries and so forth. We're fortunate to work with 21st Group at the time, who through their sort of World Super League ranking system could show like what that budget bought you in terms of a quality level. Now, it wasn't specific in terms of exactly what qualities, but it gave you a feeling of you need to find a way to be 25% better. So, and even just that language and that objective to challenge the staff to say, okay, well, can you either find the 25% in your department, and everyone mirror that, so we get the collective 25%, or is it the aggregation of those 5% across 5 departments? And whichever way you cut it up, it's arbitrary, but it's a mindset really of just saying, look, we need to make a significant step. Where do we think that step could be found, and come up with your plans really.
And I guess it's very important to have the right owner to buy into that and have the patience to buy into that. Because especially as a local man, isn't he, Mark Stott, and a lot of emotion can come in and excitement when someone takes over their local club.
Yeah. He's got that. He's not passive in any way. He's disciplined, I would say. I feel the benefit of his trust. He allows me and the team I've got there to crack on and do what we think we're experts is maybe strong, but we've got the subject matter understanding of to just crack on. He will wade in sometimes with a point of view and a thought. I think really healthy. Sometimes this quote sticks in my head all the time, but I can't remember who said it, but there's a quote saying that all progress relies on the unreasonable man. And like sometimes when you're in the room and you think, what the hell is that like? That doesn't seem logical or fair or but actually it's such a big challenge to you that you have to find a response to it. And that is often the occasions, at least in my experience, you really lift your thinking, or you see something you couldn't see ordinarily. And Mark's really good for that, actually. So he's challenging, but it comes in the right spirit. And as long as I take it in the right way, collectively, I think we found some good solutions along the way.
And we were talking about the fact the club had made progress every season. Do you think the squad is stronger and better equipped this season compared to last?
I do, actually. Yeah, I do. I really like the squad. We've challenged ourselves to take a little bit of money off the budget, and we're working towards I wouldn't say sustainability. I mean, what does that mean in today's world? We're all losing money, but in terms of where we believe our resources can be, I think we've been able to take money off the budget, but actually improve the team, which isn't easy to do. So we're really happy with it. Normal stuff. We have some injuries, and when you're in performance sport, you take your budget so close to the line that sometimes injuries can really rock the situation. Either if you need to replace those players, you go over a little bit where you need to be, or you lose some quality from your first 11. But we'll ride through that, and I'm really hopeful for this season, and I'm curious to see what we can go and do.
And what do you think about the division overall? Because you had a couple of real heavyweights in there, Birmingham in particular, and Wrexham as well.
Yeah, I mean, we competed with Wrexham since we bought the club, so we knew each other very well, we finished 5 points behind them, which was the first time we'd finished behind them in a league, which was the one we probably didn't want to finish 5 points behind them, but credit to them, they've done an incredible job. And Birmingham was like, it was like a championship team just placed in League One that was brilliantly put together, a brilliant side, but a complete juggernaut financially that no one could compete with. So no surprise to see them sort of run away with the division. But some good sides outside of that, and maybe we took the timing was good for us last year with a couple of teams perhaps underperforming as well. So we know we're up against it. We expect a response from those teams. I don't think there's the juggernaut of a Birmingham in the division this year, although there are some very strongly backed clubs. But I think it makes actually look forward to the division this year. I think it's going to be a good division. There's a lot of teams that I think could be in the mix, and certainly I think all of us will lose games, and it's going to be how we all respond to different situations along the way.
And your opener looks a big one already against Bolton, a local team, but also another big team that are aiming to be in the Championship. Yeah,
brilliant first game. I think we talked about this a little bit. Sometimes your mindset is to go into the league with a favourable opposition that you feel like you might be stronger than and work your way into the season. It doesn't ever work like that. Like they're often the games that trip you up. I think we all look forward to the big games. Certainly classify this as one of those. It'll be a full house, nothing better than our stadium full, and a big opponent, hopefully for a big performance from the team.
And I was talking earlier about how strong you've been on strategy. Your job before Stockport was Sunderland for a short time, and that's probably a club at that time with the documentary and everything that we don't associate with strategy or stability. So I was just wondering, first of all, what your time was like there, and then if that kind of redoubled your beliefs in strategy and what you later did at Stockport.
Yeah, that's a good question. To the second part of it, yes. I learnt so much in my short time there. You have to realise for 11 years prior to that, I was at Manchester City in the City Football Group that, like, bar the first couple of years there, I would say did everything nearly perfect in terms of a football operation. And so, wrongly or rightly, when you're in that system, you kind of get used to, you think that's what the world looks like. It doesn't. And actually Sunderland in that moment, which was a difficult time for the club, supporters, players, staff that were all there, that's more akin to what most football clubs look like. Like Sunderland was an extreme version. I think there was 7 managers in 5 years. 6 of them have been changed mid-season. Lots of player churn. So by the time David and myself were there, like, the squad didn't really make sense in terms of, like, it was a mix of strategies, mix of age profiles, mix of cost, wage bills, wages and contracts, etc. That's what happens when you change a lot, and when you go from you literally work on a year-to-year survival type mechanism. It can be one of the consequences. You have to say, in that time, they stayed in the Premier League when Newcastle didn't. So. Was it successful? Was it unsuccessful? That's for different people's point of view. But there is a consequence of consistent changes to your plan, going in there and being there in that moment, and also at the point when Ellis Short was looking to sell the club as well, gave me insight to stuff that's so useful to me. Like today, it was difficult at the time, but no, like, what I really did appreciate is the size of that football club and the passion of the supporters, and what attracted me to go there in the first instance was just the potential of it and how exciting that could be. So I feel like I got Sunderland, and I was frustrated not being able to help more at the time. But that's the way it is.
And it seemed a bit of a strange conclusion when you left, looking from the outside, because they then decided they didn't want or need a director of football, basically, which didn't work out well in the subsequent seasons. Yeah.
Myself and at the end of that season, I had a very straightforward conversation with Martin Boehner there, the CEO at the time, and I was on a good salary there and a big inflated title, but the club had just gone through a load of redundancies, and it didn't quite sit right with me in terms of what the club needed and what I was able to maybe contribute at the time. So I had that conversation with Martin. I think Martin would have been open to either keeping myself on or keeping or changing to another director of football. And I think they did utilise different people in that space. But I think it was a moment financially in the club's history where, they had to be careful with what they were spending. And it didn't. And the history books show that it wasn't successful on the pitch, but it was a really challenging environment off the pitch. I think it's great to see them bounce back, but sometimes clubs need that to do that, to have a reset moment and come back and get aligned and take the pain to help them build a stronger and a better club.
I suppose the documentary did really lay bare the mistakes and the turmoil and everything that was going on behind the scenes for everyone to see.
Yeah, of course. It was really, obviously documentaries and these things are, the story is better when you tell an extreme version of it. And I think they did a good job of highlighting some of those, that narrative, if you like. I wouldn't say it was a false narrative, because I think I saw some bits like that, but I also, appreciate that a lot of it would be not exaggerated, but the extreme areas of that. A lot of good people there that are good practitioners that were trying to do a good job, like lots of clubs. And I would also say lots of clubs go through those kind of chaotic moments as well, which sometimes makes it what's quite lovable about football. The thing about the documentary that I remember texting Martin after it came out, because I think it obviously got a lot of attention for being chaotic and some sort of black comedy, if you like, around it. But I wasn't there when they were doing the filming, but I was there when we sat around as a group of directors, and agreed to do it. And I think that was the right decision to do, even though potentially it made Sunderland look for a moment in time like a chaotic club. I think it showed the world how real it was and how real the supporters were. And for me, Sunderland, maybe, is it for me to say, but when I went there, we were asking the question, what's the identity of Sunderland? And we were going to work through a process to find that out. But I think you got it through that, even though it was quite chaotic the way it came through, but like a very real, honest football club, like passionate supporters. And and obviously for them to come back now, I think they almost take a little bit of that now in a much more polished and more successful version, it looks like. But I think they take that with them. So I actually think it was a good decision to do it at the time. Yeah,
superb. And spinning right back to the start of your career, how did you first get involved in football?
So I was a young player. I was in the youth teams of Peterborough United and Norwich City. Ended up trying to continue my career going into America. Decided quite quickly that I probably wasn't going to go have the success that you needed to have to make it a sustainable long-term career. Started to think about coaching. At the time, sports science was quite new, and sports science's integration into football was new. Because I'd followed a football pathway, I hadn't done A-levels and that kind of thing. So going to America and using the scholarship route allowed me a pathway into a UK university. Just at the time, John Moores was setting up their first degree in called Science and Football, which was a sports science degree, but just basically using football as all the examples. I was really excited to get onto that course, which was the first iteration of it. There's some brilliant people there as well that have become sort of lifelong friends and people in the industry, like John Murter, Mike Ford, John Iger. There'll be more people that I'm having a blank on as well.
Yeah, interesting. I think Natasha Patel talked about that, and she was on a later cohort. Maybe.
Okay. So from that, and then in future years, and as well as all the lecturers and professors that were in there were influential within the getting sports science off the ground in this country into football. Continued to play like outside of it, and actually at the end of the degree had an opportunity to go and play again in Scandinavia. But at the same time, just about 2 weeks before me leaving and getting on a plane to go out there, I had an interview for a company that was almost a startup at the time called Prozone. Prozone had started up maybe a year before that moment, but had some investment at the time. They'd sold the technology into ITV. This is when ITV took Match of the Day off BBC just for a short period of time and were looking to innovate. They used the Prozone technology to sort of do... it was Andy Townsend's Tactics truck, which was a bit of, bit naff. But off the back of that investment, Prozone were able to go out and re-recruit and build their analysts, who then they were going to go out to clubs and try and grow the use of the software in the market. So I went for an interview to that, and halfway through, I was just about to sign for this Finnish club. I got an email to say that they would offer me a job, and again, probably a moment where I had to go, well, am I going to keep chasing this dream on year-to-year contracts and see where I go, or take what could be a super exciting opportunity to work like basically in the Premier League immediately. And I took that, and again, very fortuitous in terms of being in that group of people at that moment as analysis was just starting to lift off into the UK football scene.
Oh, that's fascinating. I didn't actually know any of that, despite having known you for a while.
Yeah.
You do see these little centres of excellence within football that a lot of alumni come out of, and Prozone's one. Man City, which we'll talk about later, the analysis department is another.
Yeah.
But there's so many people who've come out of Prozone, aren't there? They're now in top positions.
Yeah. I mean, in the year, that group that went in, so I lived in a house with Tim Jenkins, ended up becoming assistant manager at Wolves. Dave Fallows lived in the house just around the corner from us. Mike Ford was just around the corner as well. Lee Darnborough. So there's a lot of people that were in that group, but really good people, like absolutely stand up for their quality. But I think the fact that we came into the game at a time where there wasn't other people already there, so we were almost the first ancestors of that, have allowed us to all be influential to one degree or another as we've gone through.
Oh, fascinating. And then what was your first job with the club?
So I was posted to Preston North End, actually. So I said the Premier League, but Preston were in the Championship trying to get in the Premier League, and young David Moyes was the manager there. So that was good. David left to go to Everton in the end of the first summer there, and actually I stayed for a little bit while longer, but then there was an opportunity to go down to Southampton, who had just taken the product on, and go and work down there with Gordon Strachan. And that was a brilliant, like Southampton then were almost like Southampton of the more recent times. Like it's always been a club that produced youth players and tried to outperform its wage bill by being innovative and so on. So it was a lovely area to live as well, first and foremost, but a nice time to be with the club. And, we went to the FA Cup final there off the back of that because Arsenal was so dominant at the time. We ended up still getting into Europe the next season. So sort of lived that, like being a club that got into Europe, did well in the Cup, finishing 8th, 9th in the Premier League, overperforming against its wage bill. But also at the end of it got relegated as well and had to live like so many Premier League clubs that sit outside that top, I would say maybe it might be 10 now. But we would think outside the top 8 that every year have to, work hard to stay in the league first and foremost. So unfortunately we caught the tail end of that. But from my point of view, a really valuable experience to go through what that looks like as well, because it just gives you context.
And I was reading on your LinkedIn, you were only the second full-time performance analyst then at that time in the country? Yeah,
so the typical model was that clubs would engage Prozone for the software, and part of that they would get a consultant to go and work with them. So the early rollout of the product, that was the model. And in the sort of, this would have been like 2004, I think Dave Fallows would have been the first one at Bolton. And then Southampton wanted to go down a similar route and start to build things in-house. So this wasn't typical at the time. But then, I would have been the second analyst to come out and be full-time employed by a club, which then allowed to start thinking about departments and so on.
Was that the Les Reed time then?
No, it was before Les Reed came in. So there was it was actually the Clive Woodward era. Right. So again, which was an incredible experience to be part of. Again, unfortunately that didn't go well with natural results onto the pitch immediately. But to be around a guy like that and to see how his brain works, and there was a lot of really, really interesting stuff that was going on at the time, but probably wasn't the right time and place to really execute it.
I know Paul Bolson presented at our conference last year, and he was saying that a lot of what Clive Woodward tried to bring in was subsequently kind of commonplace in football.
Yeah. I would say that. And what was really interesting was that he would ask stupid questions. Like that kind of leader that's able to ask a stupid. Now, at the way football was at that time, and you've got to do well with an environment to make this kind of fly and work, but. A lot of the stuff that he would say would kind of, people would be sniggering in the background, but actually there were really good challenges to it, like in terms of why do we all take goal kicks exactly the same? Why are we not having expertise around set pieces? Why what is your game model? Like these types of things, which again, like you say, a common place at the time probably just wasn't ready, or it takes time to really influence and change behaviours, doesn't it? So, but great for me as a young analyst to be around that and think, well, actually, there's some good in that. I might nick a bit of that.
Yeah, definitely. Who was the first full-time analyst? Do you know?
Dave Fallows.
Oh,
Dave
right,
Fallows.
okay.
Yeah, obviously ended up head of recruitment at Liverpool, but at Bolton Wanderers. And Bolton did an amazing job. I think they were the scene setters in many ways around sports science and analysis, psychology, just the integration of it all. Probably the biggest backroom team that you would have seen, and sort of played on that a little bit.
Yeah. And how did the move to Man City come about?
So there was an assistant coach to Gordon Strachan at Southampton called Steve Wigley. He people will know, people that listen to this will know who Steve Wigley is. Brilliant with young players, and had worked with England's under-21s with David Platt. And at the time of Manchester City, Stuart Pearce had been interim manager, I think, after Kevin Keegan towards the back end of the 2005 season, done well, and then got the job full time. And 2006-07 was going to be his first season in management. Brought Steve up as his assistant. Weirdly, City were one of the, we're talking about clubs that were the first to embrace analysis. I reckon City were one of the last in terms of the Premier League. So they had just about bought a MacBook Pro the year before, and had just got some sports code, but had a guy that might be able to utilise that. And when Steve came in, he recognised there was an opportunity to step that up in that, and luckily I got the call and made the move.
And can you remember the day that Sheikh Mansour took over?
Well, yes, because I was really excited to join City at the time in 2006. It felt like a big club, big city. It was an exciting time for me, my first bigger move, if you like. But the club was owned by a local businessman and was kind of on hard times. It was probably built on a budget to finish 16th, and it was a party if we finished 15th type thing. Got to like the January in that year, and I think there was some financial troubles. So they're looking to sell the club. Now the first takeover was to the Thai Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, which again at the time felt exciting. It was new. We had a lot of players come through the doors. Sven-Goran Eriksson as our manager. And that was exciting, but again, I think, controversy came about. The club had to be sold quite quickly. At that point, we were probably quite nervous of, here we go again. There's a lot of, my time at the back end of Southampton had been sort of categorised by a lot of churn in terms of manager. I'd gone into Man City within 1 year, manager had changed and the owner had changed, and I was probably looking at that again. That's really hard, as I spoke about the Sunderland example, but even as an analyst at the time, it's like you've got to almost start again. You've got to resell your ideas. You've got to build a new relationship, and all that takes time. You just feel like you're not progressing. So when that takeover was coming about, probably a little bit nervous, thinking, what's this going to be? It couldn't have been better, could it? It was like the best owner that you can get, best ownership group that you can get. And to be honest, initially the nerves were probably justified because it was going through on the final couple of days of the deadline, probably in the 2007, 2008 season, or maybe a year later. And then there was just this. There was probably a mouthpiece for the group that probably wasn't fit for and certainly wasn't in line with the tone that I got to know after that, but was quite showy, and we were linked with every player in the world, and we're signing, with this superstar 1 minute and the next superstar. I think we were out for everybody, and in the end, Robinho signed. It was exciting, but it was chaotic, and I was thinking from a sports performance kind of standards, but I was thinking, oh no, what's this going to be? But actually, the day after, Robinho signed, we had a presentation from Simon Pearce, who works very closely with Sheikh Mansour, and the way that he delivered the first message was just perfect in terms of this is the approach of Abu Dhabi. We have a 20-year vision as a country. This is a long-term plan. we don't talk about what we're going to do. We do it, and then we tell people how we did it, and it was just that really professional, solid mentality that was really inspiring. The next thing that happened was that I think Mark Hughes was the manager at the time, and always sort of complained about the environment being a bit run down and not having investment. I think obviously Mark was able to express that to the ownership at the time. It was an international break. Some of the players were off on internationals, but they asked everybody else to leave. And it was like that one of those BBC changing rooms type episodes. Like everyone went off, leaving the environment in one place, came back like 7 days later, and it totally changed. Like it was like there was another floor in the gym. There was artwork everywhere, new furniture. It had a real fresh feel, and it was almost like, okay, this is a new standard. This is how we operate. We don't talk about what we're going to do. We get it done, and then we show. And it was like, right, that's a way of being now for the club. And again, I've taken that with me in terms of. That's a real great mindset as a leadership group to install in your organisation.
And Simon Pearce, he's Australian, isn't he? And was an advisor, is he, to Sheikh Mansour?
Yeah.
So was he quite heavily involved at that time initially?
No, not heavily involved in terms of like on the ground and in the detail. More of an overarching kind of like point on the senior management team. And putting the board together and setting out the intention and managing the PR really around, managing the reputation really around what we were doing. Yeah.
And was it Brian Marwood very much driving the football strategy in those early days?
Yeah. So at the time of Sheikh Mansour coming and buying Abu Dhabi United Group, coming in and buying Manchester City, Mike Rigg was the technical director. He'd come in with Mark Hughes. Mike was heavily leading the sort of scout and recruitment department and starting to link into the academy. Academy was strong at Manchester City actually, and when Gary Cook came in as CEO at Manchester City, Gary had worked with Brian at Nike before and was building out his senior leadership team. And while Mike was in the detail of the scout and recruitment team, the academy, working closely with Mark. He wanted an overarching kind of like football leader, if you like, and Brian was perfect for that in terms of just that real senior person, calm, very human, and able to connect and work with people, but understood what Gary needed and how he wanted to build out the business and could connect that kind of business and football element together. So Brian came in after Brian had been in the building for a bit, looked at a reorganisation and a restructure. And as part of that, I had been, as we spoke about, the head of performance analysis, and had been lucky enough to build out a team there at the time. Brian maybe saw something in me that he felt he that could benefit him and what he was trying to get done, and promoted me into a kind of the role was strategic performance manager, but to work closely with Brian. He had 1,000,001 things to get done: build a team, build a training ground, reevaluate all the support teams, refresh, re-support the academy, and set out a new vision. He just wasn't going to be able to get to everything. It was a brilliant role for me because, like, if Brian had 10 things on his list and he was working on 1, 2, and 3, I would take over 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 and push them along. So that at the point that they were more mature, I could get Brian to take them on. But as I now know, as a sporting director, you're never too far away from the first team in terms of supporting the head coach and recruiting. So some of the more strategic elements sometimes get left to the side.
And then you moved into the role, I've got it here, Director of Football Services for the whole of CFG. And that was setting up the multi-club model then for the group. That's right.
So Brian, that model with Brian and myself there and the rest of the team ran from sort of 2009 through to 2013-14. In that time, we were lucky enough to win the Premier League twice and go on the journey, FA Cups, etc. In 2013-14 was a change in CEO. So Gary Cook left. Ferran Soriano came in from Spanair, but prior to that, Barcelona. And Ferran had always had this vision of a global club and a multi-club model, and brought that philosophy and that thinking into City. I remember that really strongly the day Brian told me that he was going to be coming out of his role and that he'd had a conversation with the ownership about this kind of like multi-club, like global thing. Like, I've been around football enough. I thought both of us were getting sacked, basically. I thought it was like palming off to the side. It was like the slow letdown. We relocated from the training ground. So Chiki Bagirstein came in from Barcelona and became sporting director. Lovely guy, super talented, gone on to incredible success. You couldn't like the guy more. Brian and I were like relocated from the training ground to the stadium offices. So again, just thinking, right, this is just a foregone conclusion. We're on our way out. And it felt quite clunky to start off with because we had no real understanding of what it was that we were going to go and be doing. We're starting to work in this office environment that was different. It was a bit more 9 to 5-y. But we were tasked with sort of conceptualizing what this group could be and then what it would need in order to function. So once we spent time on that, and there were a couple of reference points around at the time. So it was like Red Bull that were out as a multi-club. But we saw that as more of like a talent pathway model. So they would move through the clubs to the top, and they'd been successful with that. And there were like the partner clubs kind of models with Chelsea and Vitesse and United with Antwerp, etc. So you'd seen a bit of this where you think it could work from a talent movement point of view. But then we also were inspired by organisations like the EIS here, in terms of like a centralised servicing department that could support multiple sports, but with commonality around their practice. So we looked at those couple of things, and one of the Ferran's big things was about like building a methodology, a city methodology. Like, we'd had success, but what was it about that? How was the way of doing it? How could we sort of codify that so that when we were acquiring clubs, that we could roll that way of working out to these other clubs. So we spent, I would say, I can't really remember the timeline, but I'm going to say it was up to about 6 to 9 months just working on that conceptually of what that would look like and trying to codify this methodology. And then there was an opportunity to acquire the first club, which was Melbourne Heart in the A-League. Got a rebrand to Melbourne City. And that was almost our test case in terms of rolling out a way of work into a small club in another league. And then from that, we knew that we were going to acquire the upcoming MLS license in New York, but it was probably 2 years away. In the meantime, one of our partners, Nissan, who owned a club in Japan called Yokohama, we did a 80-20 split with them where we would provide services out to them. So we were up and running in terms of like this, proving the concept really, and then ready for New York that was coming down the track.
And did you help to identify the clubs that the group wanted to acquire?
No, not really. No, they were more, I would say, more commercially led in terms of like looking geographically around the world. And I think some of the thinking behind it was looking at football was going through a real growth phase at that time in terms of like the media rights. So looking at emerging markets that were starting to grow in media value and popularity, and trying to make sure that we were in the market. So when I left, we had 5 clubs, which were Melbourne, Yokohama, New York, Torquay, and Girona had just been acquired in a partnership. But since then, you can see the movement into India, Brazil. We were constantly going out on propositions. So like we remember going out to see, club in South Africa and looking in, Asia into other markets to see, how we could collaborate and what the model would be. But certainly I think they've got 14, 15 now. So they've continued that model. And I think now the way it's explained is that they have clubs that are, through the years of going through it, they've refined their model in terms of being like more commercial clubs and entertainment clubs and more talent clubs. And they've got that kind of split around the two.
Okay. So what's the difference between an entertainment club and a talent club?
A talent club would be a pure kind of player trading or player development model, and looking at like Lommel would be a really good example of that in terms of like a really good registration platform first, so in terms of you can come from a number of territories in the world and be able to have easy enough access into the league to then work together in a under the city coaches, etc. but with the objective of moving those players through into other markets, really. So that would be the objective of that club, where you would see maybe New York, who would also be a bit more of a trading club, or maybe City would be the best example of an entertainment club in terms of, like, you know, one of the biggest brands in the world, playing in the biggest leagues, biggest competitions, and it's about partnerships, it's about filling the stadium, it's about superstars, it's about that type of thing.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And I know there can sometimes be a bit of a feeling with the smaller clubs, like a Lommel, that you're servicing the bigger ones, the entertainment ones. Yeah. Is that a fair comment, do you think?
Yes. Listen, I think one of the things that was fascinating about being in a global group is that it was so new. We wouldn't have other reference points in football, or nearly even sport. Really, we would actually speak to a lot more commercial organisations to say, how does this feel like, where you're the regional office in this small market and you've got this kind of big brother, little brother type of situation. And I suppose we anticipated quite a lot of tension around that. But what we found, like particularly like in Melbourne, they loved it. It was like, for them, they just were so inspired. It was like being bought by Google or something like that. They were like, they felt that, all they just wanted more and more of your time, and they wanted to know how it was being done and can you spend more time with this, because they're just so ambitious and wanted to do things really, really well. So actually, as long as we were in the central servicing department, so as long as we went out and we felt like we were adding value to them, it was always a really positive environment. Where it does get tense sometimes is like, obviously it's probably well known, the City style. We were always challenged with saying City style is beautiful football. Like, what is beautiful football? That's different people. But I think people can close their eyes and understand what the City style is. And when you're trying to roll that out into emerging markets who might have a salary cap and might have players that they have to take that are on $40,000 that have just come out of college that probably can't execute the way that you want to do it, that coaches would get frustrated with that and say, are we getting told to play this? But in the end, we found a nice balance of, trying to innovate within it. Yes, setting high standards and being a bit like what we talked about. Mark's 7-year plan is like, if that's the objective, how do we get there? And you don't find a way unless you're sort of forced to find a way. But at the same time, maybe tweaking a little bit to be more adaptable. This is a cool thing about the group, is that in theory and in practice, as much as Man City will be pushing down the lessons to a small club like a Melbourne, innovations Melbourne can make by having to adapt can push up to Manchester City, which because at the City end of that scale, you're looking for 1%ers all the time, and it can be those sorts of things that can innovate.
Right, and that does happen, does it? That you get the innovations that then get implemented out of Man City and throughout the group?
Yeah, 100%. Not just all in football. It can be in medical. Like, it can be in you think about globally. There's lots of different sort of treatment methods and philosophies, and if you encounter a particular problem with a particular player in one market, it's like you might not have that set of expertise within that medical team, but when you expand it globally, you've got more chance of finding it. And if you're smart with how you hire, you can make sure there's a balanced set of skills across the group that allow you to network that really well. So across recruitment, medical, sports science, psychology, coaching, analysis, etc. There's hundreds of little things here that if you are on top of it, you can connect and add value to all clubs in the group.
We've not actually seen too many players move within the group, have we, that I can think of, or moved to a city? You've had like a Silvino, but not too many others really.
No, there's been a lot of talent produced and sold outside the group. I think they've done fantastically well of that. In terms of clubs that have purely gone through each of the clubs, there's certainly 4, 5, 6 examples that I can think of. But and then that's why I think in terms of like a talent pathway, I don't think for me that's not the overall philosophy. It's one of the benefits that could be, but it's not the sole benefit. It's a multitude of reasons.
Yeah. Okay. Are economies of scale a big thing as well, that you can have like a core way of doing, say, your performance analysis?
Yeah.
Then that gets rolled out throughout.
For sure. Yeah. So I think recruitment would be the biggest one. Is like, so for Manchester City, as they will need coverage in all areas of the world in terms of trying to find the best talent, but it might not make sense to beef up your scouting operation in, I don't know, Asia. Let's say Asia. It's become more popular over the time, but the fact that because of Yokohama, we'll have to have a big operation in Asia, it means like City get the benefit of that. Yokohama need it anyway, and so on. And if you work that right around all the regions in the world, there's real efficiency in terms of everyone leveraging off each other's market.
Right. And can you share data as well? Because I know tracking data could be a bit of an issue where there's different suppliers in different leagues, but does that allow that sharing?
Yeah, so all your sort of performance suppliers, you can get really good consistency across that so that everyone's working on the same platforms. You know, the numbers mean the same things in different markets. You're not repeating the contract, so there's efficiencies in terms of, like you say, economies of scale. So there's things like that, again, that would be the model, is that New York, for example, will want to operate like the best that they can do. So they'll want to take a tracking provider, they'll want to take a GPS provider, they'll want to, have psychology support, they'll want to have all that. But actually, by buying it almost in bulk, it would cost them less than it ordinarily would have done. So it allows them to spend more of their available money on talent, really.
Right, superb. And your exit came about 2016, I think. But
yeah.
What was the reason behind that? Because Sunderland came afterwards.
Sunderland. So I would probably, I think I've shared this story in other forums. Really, I was probably to the point where we were working so strategically, and we were the central servicing team working across the globe so remotely. Really, I really just missed that kind of like real sense and feel of being close to the action. And honestly, I got a bit paranoid. I was detraining, that I was becoming a bit of one of those, I don't know what I can say on here, but they're one of those waffly guys that is all theory and no practice. And I wanted to, it had felt a long time from being really close to the action and feeling the punches a little bit. So I wanted to get back out there. I did have conversations with a couple of other clubs at the time. Brian was supportive. I spoke clearly with Brian. Where there were opportunities in the group, they were going to be international, and that wasn't quite right from a family perspective. So when the Sunderland thing came up, my energy comes a lot from growing things, like fixing problems and growing things. Like if we're really quite well performing and steady, I get bored. I'm actually a bit dangerous in that situation because my brain's going to want something to do and I'll invent stuff. And actually it doesn't need inventing, if you know what I mean. So the fact that Sunderland was struggling and needed a bit of a turnaround, I was really energized by that. I really wanted to go in there and help. So I was motivated by that, and motivated to start leading and seeing how good I was, really. I think one of the frustrations with the Sunderland situation was that as much as I was able to see another situation, I probably wasn't able to get my hands dirty as much as I'd have wanted to do. That's why I ended up leaving.
Yeah. Excellent. And drawing towards a close now, what do you think about the state of the game overall? Because there's a lot of talk about the EFL, the fact that clubs spend such a high proportion of their turnovers on their wages. It's not sustainable for a lot of clubs. What do you see being in the thick of it there in League One?
Look, it's true. Clubs spend a high proportion of their money on players. I've lived through the conversation of should there be salary caps in the EFL. Obviously there was a period while we were outside the EFL, but through COVID that there was. Understand the pushback from the PFA and the player side of things in terms of putting a limit on it. In the end, we do have free choice in terms of what we want to pay the players, but it is really, really hard when you've got the pressures of fans, sponsors, economics, really, to accept not pushing and not trying to get promoted and so on. So it's a very difficult operating landscape to make it sustainable. And I think through football's history, there's tended to always be somebody that will take the problem off you at some stage. So when owners have been looking to sell, okay, they might have had to bear some negative financial consequences themselves, but there nearly is always somebody that will come and take it. However, I don't think we can rely on that forever. I think, certainly I've had conversations with people that are interested in sports, clubs, etc., but just see it as ludicrous business, which it is, in terms of just throwing money away year after year after year. So I think there's going to be some very big and healthy debates coming up in the next few years around it all. And I think we have to be open to everything. Tradition is a really powerful thing in football and brings so many great things, the heritage and the history and the stories. But it doesn't mean like the way we've been working has to be the way what the next 150 years looks like, because if we want 150 years, it's probably telling us we do need to change. That's my take on it. That won't be everybody's take on it. And I think there's going to have to be a lot of discussion and a lot of open-mindedness from a lot of people in order to make those changes. But look, things are starting to move with the new regulator, and I believe if we've all got the right mindset around it, it can be a force for good.
Yeah. And you're very well placed to have a valuable opinion on this, obviously having been a sporting director throughout the game and now CEO since February on the business side.
Yeah.
So that's quite an unusual move, actually. I can't think of anyone else who's done that, sporting director to CEO. But yeah, how's that going?
Good. I'm enjoying it. So, I still would say I'm really, really new into it. Still very involved on the football side. It's just been a transfer market. But I think a club of our size, you just talked about the main areas why clubs are losing money. It's around the talent. And so I think actually it's strange to me why there isn't more football people, I suppose, coming across, or at least CEOs with a really strong understanding of football in order to really organise your organisation, really get it aligned, make sure you're focusing on the right priorities, make sure you're right sizing against everything, because otherwise you end up getting two camps, and it can't be like that. It has to be aligned. I think I have to say I'm supported really well by a strong team on the operational and commercial side of the club. We have a chief operating officer who is a really, really top operator, and I wouldn't be able to do it without someone like that being able to support me. But my sort of remit and my outlook is around the growth of the football club. So football's a big part of that. The brand and the marketing is another part of it. The people and the way that we lead is another part of it. And I'll take more of a leading role in those aspects, whereas the commercial parts will be run by experts in those areas.
And a final one, what does the future hold for you? Because I know we talked about the 7-year plan. Is that the end of your involvement, or do you then have a new plan?
Well, I'd love there to be a new plan. I'm very, and maybe there will be. I'm very focused on, doing what I said I'd do, and that was to deliver the vision. And we're not there yet. So that's my whole focus. Like, when we're able to reach the championship, and it might take 8 years, or it might take 9 years, but at that point, I will feel satisfied that I was able to help lead the change and the progress of the club back into the championship. And then we'll sit down and have another conversation and see if I'm the right man for the next part, and if we've all got the energy and the skills to be able to do it. But it's been an amazing journey to date. I am so thankful that my career has turned out in the way it had to, and I landed at Stockport County in this moment with these people. I'm really motivated to get the rest of the job done, and then we'll see what happens after that.
Yeah, fantastic. And you're going to be taking part in our TGG Live conference October 7th.
I am looking
Old
forward
Trafford.
to it. Yeah, the conference is always brilliant. As you know, I've been to the last few, and you play a really, really valuable role in the system, and it's been amazing to see the journey that you guys have been on, from starting up the first couple of articles to what you are today, and no, credit to you and to everyone that gets something out of it.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Simon, and thanks so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
Thank you.